Moving from my tailbone, I curl under, lower, middle and upper, and my gaze comes to the navel as I round my spine. Again, I'm pushing down into my hands, down into my shins, and finding the space at the back of my body. Move from my tailbone into my lower back, into my middle back, and my upper, and my head comes forward. Now, what I want you to think about is this, with this extension work, when we're coming forwards, is imagine you've got two eyes in your chest, and wherever your eyes in your head are looking, the eyes in your chest should be looking in the same direction. Okay, so what we want to avoid is being here and here, because this throws a really nasty junction into the neck. So you're either here, or your chest is forward and your gaze is forward. Okay, so you may not have a huge amount of movement in your middle back, but it's all about knowing where your intention is to go to. So you may not have very much, but I want you to know that that's the direction you're going, rather than kind of just not trying to go anywhere and just sort of losing that element of the work. So from here, let's work through that again. I push into my lower legs and my tailbone comes under. I round into my lower back, my middle back, and my upper back as I gaze towards my navel. I'm creating a curve in my spine. Then I move from my tailbone into my lower back, into my middle back. My heart, or the eyes of my heart, start to look forwards. And then my gaze looks forward. And in this position, there's a softening of the elbows. And I feel like I'm pulling in towards me with my hands a little bit to draw my heart and my gaze forward. I then start to move from my tail, lower, middle, upper. I start to straighten the arms and push into the ground to pull. I then soften through tail, lower or middle, the elbows soften as the gaze lifts and my heart lifts forward. Breath comes in. Checking those shoulders are moving down the back. The shoulder blades are down and into the back pockets of your jeans. Now we move from the head. The head comes down and I start to lift into my upper back, into my middle back, into my lower back, and finally the tailbone is under. I lift my head and I move through my spine into the lower. The gaze is forwards, tail is in. One more time, the head comes down, lifting into the upper, the middle, the lower, and the tail. I'd like you to stay in this position and then just start to shift your weight back slightly. Try not to lose the curve, keep rounding. And then keep the curve and come back over your hands. When you're over your hands, unround, so lift your bottoms, lift your tail, and lift your chest. Then start to bend your elbows and push yourself backwards. And then round over the top again, softening. Bend the elbows and push back. So this is our wave. We wave forwards over the hands and we soften and we push back. One more time, I round forwards over my hands and then I arch, extend and soften down and sit back. Now I'm going to pull myself forwards using my gaze and my chest leading me forwards. I come up forwards. Then I round and I lean into my back. Oh. I lead with my gaze and my heart to come forwards. And I round and lean into my back. The breath comes in as I pull forwards. The breath out through the mouth to come back. And then just come onto your hands and knees. Bring your should be a comfortable distance from your bottom. And that is really difficult because we've all got, difficult for me to say for an exact science, because we've all got different size, length bones and, you know, different range of movement of our joints. So I want you to just bear in mind two things. If your feet are too close to your heels, what happens is this big thigh bone really sits quite deep into the hip, and it can really sort of restrict the movement. It becomes quite deep and fixed. So we don't want to have that deep angle. We want to try and just let the feet be far enough away so that we've got a little bit of space in the front of these hips here, yeah, to just be able to get that tailbone down, feel that space at the front. The same thing is not to have them too far away, and I see this quite a lot. There's a couple of things that happen as the feet go further away. You might find that your back arches, particularly if you're tight in the hips. That's something that my pattern will tend to do if I go too far. So I'm exaggerating that, but we don't want the pelvis to be tilted that way. We want the pelvis so that you feel safe from the back of the body against the ground. The other thing is, with your feet being too far away, you're more likely to get cramp in the hamstrings. So if that happens, just adjust the feet slightly, and you might find that that is avoided. Anyway, so from this position, I just want to mention the back line of the body. So you've got your sacrum, which is the opposite to your pubic bone. So here's your pubic bone. Your sacrum is on the reverse side of your body there. And that's the point that should be in touch with the mat. Then you will feel a sense of space under the lower back. And that space is not an exact science. As the same with our limbs, our bodies are made, they all look similar, but our architecture is very different. So don't worry if you feel like your curve is smaller than somebody else's, or you've got a particularly big curve. As long as you feel your sacrum against the mat, and then you notice your middle back, and then the base of the skull. Those are those 3 points of contact that really do help to bring us into a more centered position through the spine. And once the spine is centered, then we stand a better chance of working the body better, but also preventing imbalances. So knowing where your spine is when your spine is in center is another really big part of the work that becomes more familiar to you. So tailbone, middle back, base of the skull. And sometimes you might have to lean kind of quite into that middle back, because you might find that your pattern sort of moves forward. So just make sure we're constantly having that conversation with yourself. Yeah, thinking about the back ribs, the base of the skull, and the feet grounded. So we'll start with our pelvic tilts. With our feet grounded, I stand in my feet. So I notice my heels, I spread my toes, and I gather up through the inside of my legs. It's like a little pull with my legs, and I scoop my tail and I roll my pelvis back. So my tailbone, it's like I've literally got a tail coming up between my legs. And then I let it go down again. As I scoop, the tail comes up between my legs and then rolls back down. I scoop, the tail comes up, and I lift my tailbone and I lower back. And then I roll back down onto the mat. Curl, lift tailbone, lower back, middle back, and then I roll down through the spine. So we're going to come all the way up now. So I roll from my tail, lower. Make sure you're standing on your feet and your knees are parallel, so you've got that connection up through the inside of your legs. Gathering the sitting bones, opening through the front of the hips. And we don't need to go any further than that, knee, hip, and shoulder. Sometimes I see this happening where we're really sort of overextended, and that causes sort of friction or junctions in the spine. And we want to keep that space there. Remember we talked about that hooded cobra. It's that same feeling here. The skin of the pubic bone comes up, but it goes into the back of the body to keep those ribs in line with the pelvis. You don't want to rock those ribs backwards, okay? So everything's in line, knees in parallel, my arms are reaching away. I want you to bring your knees together and then open them. Bring your knees together and then open. Bring your knees together and open. Bring your knees together and open. And then pull your feet up off the floor. Keep those hips where they are, then pop them down. Lift the feet up and pop them down. Lift them up and 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 down. Then we're going to lift the heels and down. Lift the heels and down. Coming up, down, up, down. Two more. Lift and lower, lift and lower. Roll your spine down, moving through your upper back, middle back, lower back, and tailbone down. Well done.